Hello, thanks for clicking on this video from Checkmate Humanity. A few months ago, I covered the fact that Marilyn Manson and Evan Rachel Wood are embroiled in a very public battle akin to the one that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard were in last year. I have some updates on that front. One of the updates is that one of the women who joined Evan Rachel Wood in her accusations against Manson has now recanted her accusations. This piece of news may not be new to all of you because many of my viewers watch the same channels that covered this. But there's another update. The judge presiding over the case of Brian Warner versus Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore has thrown out Ashley Smithline's declaration and cannot, I repeat, cannot be used as evidence in Manson's case against Evan Rachel Wood. When I saw this first update, I even scheduled a live saying, uh-oh, looks like trouble in Evan Rachel Wood's case. It's only fair for me to cover the fact that this doesn't look good for Evan Rachel Wood. How did this happen? Well, in response to Smithline's declaration, Evan Rachel Wood submitted a response with evidence disproving Smithline's claim that Evan Rachel Wood performed some sort of Jedi mind trick on her. In a minute, I'll show you this evidence, but just to let you know, Manson's lawyers have said that Smithline's declaration wasn't thrown out on the merits of her claims or her evidence, but because the declaration was not submitted in time to be considered in the matter that is currently before the court. So basically, they weren't able to even meet procedural deadlines in their case. But in my opinion, even if they had met their procedural deadline in the case, the evidence that Evan Rachel Wood presented was pretty damning against Smithline, and it would have been thrown out anyway. The matter currently before the court in the case is a motion to dismiss that Wood's team has filed requesting that Manson's case be dismissed on anti-SLAPP grounds. Now, what is SLAPP? S-L-A-P-P? It stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. Here's a California law firm's explanation of anti-SLAPP because I'm not a lawyer. Anti-SLAPP laws are meant to balance the rights of free speech and petition with the need to prevent use of the court system to silence people's exercise of those same rights. In layman's terms, and again, I'm a layman, so take this for what it's worth, the anti-SLAPP statutes allow defendants in defamation cases to request the lawsuit be dismissed early in a case before they go through all the really lengthy and expensive litigation when they believe the court system is being used to silence someone. There's a hearing set for April 11th where the judge will consider whether Manson's case will be dismissed based on anti-SLAPP. Smithline's declaration recanting her allegation was filed in support of Manson's case continuing to move forward, and it was covered, again, really heavily on YouTube. Evan Rachel Wood's declaration, which was chock full of proof against what Smithline said, has been covered on mainstream media, but from what I can tell, it hasn't been covered much on YouTube or other social media. I don't have a good answer or a good reason for this. I have a lot of criticism for mainstream media, and dragging mainstream media seems to be one of social media's favorite pastimes, right? One of the criticisms is that mainstream media is biased and only covers one side of a situation or heavily favors one side of a situation. But here are the facts. If I was only watching YouTube for my updates on the Manson case, I wouldn't have known that the judge threw out Smithline's declaration and that it's useless as a tool against Evan Rachel Wood, even though the evidence submitted in that declaration is honestly much more powerful than what Smithline said in her declaration. The good news is that I don't only rely on YouTube for my updates, so I did a Google News search and saw that there was an update. And in all honesty, I was pretty shocked. So let's go through their dueling declarations and I can show you what I mean. Here's Ashley Smithline's declaration. In November 2010, I had a brief consensual sexual relationship with Brian Warner, also known as Marilyn Manson, during a trip I took to Los Angeles from Thailand where I was living. 10 years later, I succumbed to pressure from Evan Rachel Wood and her associates to make accusations of R and SA against Mr. Warner that were not true. In 2020, I was contacted by either Ashley Walters or Ilma Gore to participate in a group meeting of women who, they said, had relationships or experiences with Mr. Warner. I knew Mrs. Walters from my trip to Los Angeles in 2010. She was Mr. Warner's assistant, and she arranged my travel. I also spent time with her during the trip. Ultimately, I participated in at least one such group call and a meeting that was filmed in October 2020, which I only later learned was for Phoenix Rising. From this time in 2020 through June 2021, I had many conversations with Ms. Wood. During my conversations with Ms. Wood, she described acts allegedly committed by Mr. Warner against Ms. Wood and supposed victims and asked me whether the same things happened to me. I remember she asked me whether I had been, among other things, whipped, chained, tied up, branded, cut, assaulted while sleeping, beaten, or art. She said all these things happened to Ms. Wood and others, and that when Ms. Wood was with Mr. Warner, every moment was a moment of survival. When I said, no, this didn't happen to me, and this was not my experience, I recall being told by Ms. Wood that just because I could not remember didn't necessarily mean that it didn't happen. Well, at first I knew Mr. Warner did not do these things to me. I eventually began to question whether he actually did. On numerous occasions, I was told by Ms. Wood, Esme Bianco, and others that these things happened to Ms. Wood and Ms. Bianco, and asked whether the same thing happened to me, and told that I may just be misremembering what happened, repressing my memories of what happened, or that my memories had not yet surfaced, which they said happened to people against whom these acts were perpetuated. I was asked whether I was repressing memories just to get through day-to-day life, and whether it was easier just to not think about what actually happened than accept reality. They also said it was important for people to come forward so that no one else gets hurt. I also recalled that in one of the group meetings I attended with Ms. Wood and Ms. Gore, Ms. Gore said they could arrange security for anyone who felt in danger from Mr. Warner. I recall that Ms. Bianco said during this discussion that private investigators had been parked outside of her house and probably were parked outside of mine. I also had separate conversations with Ms. Bianco during this time in which she told me that her relationship with Mr. Warner was similar to that described by Ms. Wood. She insisted that I was repressing memories like she and others supposed victims of Mr. Warner had done. Eventually, I started to believe what I was repeatedly told happened to Ms. Wood and Ms. Bianco also happened to me. On or about January 2021, I attended a call in which Ms. Wood said that on a certain day she would post to her social media naming Mr. Warner as her, and that we all should do the same thing on or around the same day. I discussed with Ms. Gore making such a statement on my Instagram page accusing Mr. Warner of abuse. Ms. Gore drafted the statement and I gave her my password to post it. I want to stop right there and say that I listened to an interview that she did, that Smithline did on YouTube. I'll post a link to the interview below so you know, so you can listen to it for yourself. And she said that Smithline drafted the statement, then it was edited, and because she didn't know how to work social media, so she gave her password to Ilma Gore, and Ilma Gore posted it for her. That's what she said, which is different from what she's saying here. Continuing on, the narrative ultimately posted to my account on or around February 1, 2021 contained untrue statements about Mr. Warner, including that there was violence and non-consensual sexual activity in our brief relationship and that I had repressed memories of the same. As another example, there was no branding or cutting experience during the brief relationship and certainly no Marilyn Manson initials carved on my body. On June 29, 2021, a complaint was filed in the lawsuit Ashley Lindsay Morgan Smithline versus Brian Warner et al. Case number blah, blah, blah. The complaint was filed by my attorney at the time, Jay Ellwinger. Ms. Bianco told me Mr. Ellwinger was her lawyer and that I should use him. Mr. Ellwinger did not review the contents of the complaint with me before filing it and did not send a draft of the complaint to approve before filing it. The complaint contained untrue statements about Mr. Warner, including that there was violence and non-consensual sexual activity in our brief relationship and that I had repressed memories of the same until meeting with Ms. Wood, Ms. Gore, and others in 2020. Leading up to the filing of the complaint, I felt pressured by Mr. Ellwinger to go on a press tour, which included an interview on The View and an interview and photo shoot with People magazine. I was very uncomfortable doing this press, but felt pressured to do it. And after the lawsuit was filed on my behalf, I fired Mr. Ellwinger and the case was dismissed. I never received any money from Mr. Warner, and I'm not seeking any money from him. I have no intention of refiling any lawsuit against Mr. Warner. I never intended to pursue criminal charges against Mr. Warner and have no intention now or ever pursuing criminal charges, as Mr. Warner did not ever urge me. Looking back, I feel I was manipulated by Ms. Wood, Ms. Gore, Ms. Bianco, and Mr. Ellwinger to spread publicly false accusations against Mr. Warner. I declare blah, blah, so this is under penalty of perjury. Now, here's what strikes me about this statement. Before we move on to the next statement, she provides no proof of this pressure campaign. She shows no proof of these statements. She shows no screenshots that show this pressure campaign. The statements that were made by the people in her declaration saying things like, maybe your memory was repressed. Those come across to me like statements of somebody would say to somebody when they're just having a conversation about whether it occurred or not. They don't come across to me as manipulative statements. She ultimately made the choice to give her password to somebody else to post something. I also want to address the way it looks when there was a coordinated media push for these allegations. And what she basically says is that there was a Vanity Fair article planned, and that it was decided that on the date and time that the Vanity Fair article was published, a number of the accusers, I think there were 4 or 5 of them, were all going to publish their statements on Instagram at the same time. That media coordination is completely normal and above board. That kind of media coordination happens all the time. That's actually good media strategy. Now, I agree that it doesn't look great for Evan Rachel Wood or Ilma Gore to have taken so much onus of the situation, to have gotten the password of Ashley Smithline and then posted it for her. That to me is the appearance of impropriety, even if it isn't impropriety. When you look back on it, that looks sketchy. But I'm also going to say this. She gave the password. She gave the statement. She gave her consent for those statements to be made. She then went on a press tour and she said the things that she said on the press tour. And now she wants to, like, you know, as Emily D. Baker might say, put the shit back in the bowl. Right? I mean, so she was either lying to Evan Rachel Wood in the beginning, or she just got in over her head and decided, you know what, I can't carry on with these lies. If that's the case, in my opinion, she's taking the responsibility for what she did and turning it into a smear campaign against the primary accuser, and potentially is being incentivized to do that through whatever settlement agreement she made with Brian Warner. I don't know for sure, but that's kind of how it looks to me. We won't know until we have a decision from the judge. Again, this is what was heavily covered by YouTube. But here is the answer from Evan Rachel Wood. And this has not been covered by YouTube, but it has been covered by mainstream media. And I'm really dumbfounded as to why. She says, I never pressured or manipulated Ashley Morgan Smithline to make any accusations against plaintiff Brian Warner. And I certainly never pressured or manipulated her to make accusations that were not true. It was Smithline who first contacted me in March 2021. Now, did you notice in Smithline's declaration, and let's go back to it right now. In Smithline's declaration, she never talks about who approached who. She goes right into, hey, I had a relationship with Brian Warner, and then 10 years later, I succumbed to a pressure campaign, and then I was contacted to be in Phoenix Rising, and I felt pressured to do that and the press tour. But she jumps over, conveniently, all the things leading up to her being in contact with Evan Rachel Wood. And here's what Evan Rachel Wood says about that. Specifically, on March 11, 2019, I posted an Instagram post with quotes about being a survivor of domestic violence from a podcast on which I had appeared. At that time, I had spoken publicly about being a survivor of abuse, including testimony before the United States Congress, but I had not yet publicly named Mr. Warner as my Ms. Smithline publicly commented on my March 11, 2019 Instagram post stating, when he had me captive in the stupid ballet studio, I cringed hearing him brag about replaying that scene from Rules of Attraction to you. I thought no one would ever talk about this. Ms. Smithline then replied to her first comment, tagging me and herself, and said, sorry, that hit me really hard today. Before Ms. Smithline publicly commented on my March 11, 2019 Instagram post, I had not met her. I had not communicated with her, and I did not know who she was. But in her comments, Ms. Smithline referenced information about my private experiences with Mr. Warner that was not publicly available at that time. Specifically, Mr. Warner once, while he made me watch a particular scene from the movie Rules of Attraction. Mr. Warner and I were the only two people in the room when that occurred. Okay? So what she's basically saying here is that she posted on Instagram. She didn't say who her was. And then Smithline posted a specific incident of abuse that Warner recounted to Smithline on this Instagram post. The first and only time I ever met Ms. Smithline in person was at the October 21, 2020 meeting of survivors, which was filmed for the HBO documentary Phoenix Rising. Prior to the meeting, I had never spoken to Ms. Smithline on the phone. During the October 2020 meeting, Ms. Smithline described abuse that she claimed Mr. Warner inflicted upon her. Ms. Smithline has always told me that she was abused by Mr. Warner. I had several communications with Ms. Smithline over via private messages on Instagram after People magazine published on or around May 5th, 2021, an article about Mr. Warner's and Ms. Smithline. Attached here to blah, blah, blah is a true and correct copy of my May 5th Instagram communications with Ms. Smithline. Attached here, so she shows the exhibits where Smithline is reacting to people's reaction to the People magazine article. I posted a story on Instagram that included a screenshot of the headline of an October 23rd, 2021 article included in a Metalhead Zone entitled "Accuser Admits Marilyn Manson Was Planning to Kill Evan Rachel Wood." Listen to this, okay? You can't listen to this and then say, oh, Smithline was just manipulated. Smithline didn't choose on her own accord to come forward and make these claims and give a password and hit send. Ms. Smithline sent me an unsolicited reply to my Instagram story stating, "I second that. He said, I'm going to kill my ex so many times." And then it talks about attaching these exhibits. I communicated with Smithline via Instagram in March after Mr. Warner filed the present lawsuit. Ms. Smithline sent me a message through Instagram on April 27, 2022. We then had additional communications through Instagram on May 4th and May 5th. There's one thing I want to go back to here and say, in Smithline's interviews, she has talked about how when she was invited to go to the filming of this documentary, she showed up and there's a film crew there and she had to sign a waiver. But the waiver didn't say who the production crew was for or whether it was for HBO. Now, I don't know whether they knew the film crew and the production crew knew that they would be filming for HBO's Phoenix Rising, but I will tell you some insider knowledge about how these documentary productions go. In most instances, when directors are filming documentaries, they don't know where it's going to end up. It's possible that Phoenix Rising could have ended up on Netflix. It's possible that it could have ended up on Prime, Amazon Prime. I was involved in a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma. When we were filming, we had no idea where it was going to air. We had no idea whether it was going to be a theatrical release or a documentary on Netflix or HBO or whatever. It was still being shopped around, and a lot of times the decision isn't made until it's screened in front of an audience and they see the reaction, until the buyers actually see the audience reaction to the documentary. So there wasn't anything, in my opinion, shady going on, especially if she's signing a piece of paper that says, I'm okay with what I say here on film being used in perpetuity in stage, screen, and film. In fact, she probably, in my opinion, liked that fact. And here are the exhibits submitted by Evan Rachel Wood's side. It's sideways here. Apologies for that. This is Exhibit A, and this is what Smithline wrote on Evan Rachel Wood's Instagram post. I'm a survivor myself, and it wasn't until very recently that I really came to terms with everything and was even able to identify what had happened, she said. When it happens, it's very complicated. You lie to yourself. You're being lied to. You're being gaslit in a dangerous situation. You lose a sense of self and your sense of reality because you're stuck in this nightmare. So it's not clear that she's talking about Manson in that comment, but also Evan Rachel Wood wasn't naming Manson. The only thing they did both have in common is a past relationship with Manson. Here's a private Instagram message. The DA said there's nothing they'll offer that he'll take. He better go for life. We'll see what happens. This is May 5th, and this is Smithline saying to Evan Rachel Wood on the day, I guess this is the day that the People magazine was posted. And Smithline says, "How are you? I can't breathe. I have no reason to make this up." So are we supposed to believe this or what she has said since? So then Evan says, "Don't let anybody get to you. Just sit in your truth. No one can touch that. But I get it. I really do." To me, those come across as supportive statements that you would want to hear from anybody that you're going through this with. That doesn't come across as manipulative to me. And again, Smithline provided no evidence of actual manipulation. They don't run stories, and this is Evan saying this to Smithline, they don't run stories like this without something to back it up. You are very credible. Thank you. They know. We know. Sane people know. His fans are just loud. They're really saying we're winning. And that means the fans are saying we're winning. The only winning is in a real legal situation, which he will not win. But they, his fans, keep him going. They could watch him plead guilty while beating and R-ing a 12-year-old and say he's innocent. Where is the proof? It takes a special kind of person to threaten and R and abuse victims with R and abuse. So then this is the proof that when Evan posted a story with a headline that said, "Accuser admits Marilyn Manson was planning to kill Evan Rachel Wood," Smithline writes, "I second that. He said I'm going to kill my ex so many times." And here Evan Rachel Wood says, "People have a lot to say about lives they've never lived." Ashley says, "Don't they just?" And then Evan is giving her advice. Block, ignore, hand on heart, give yourself love. So then Ashley says, "Are you okay?" "Hanging in there, tired and very sad, but I'll be okay." And Ashley says, "Vultures. Please don't be sad. I love you. You're an amazing mother and friend. Your heart is the size of the ocean." Then Evan says, "You okay?" Ashley, "Yeah, I'm proud of you. Same. I really am. I think you're a fucking warrior." And then Evan says, "We're going to get hit with another wave when the doc comes out, which will be hard, but I hope it helps with people's eyes open to the truth. One step closer to freedom. Oh, it started when he sued. It's been relentless. Yep, I haven't read anything." That's a smart public figure who doesn't read all the comments and doesn't read all this stuff online. They're easily the least important nuts on earth. Ignorance is killing the planet. The truth shall set you free. Evan later says, "That's why a lot of really brave people, yourself included, have been telling brutal truths. But first it'll piss you off. He'll plead guilty and they'll say he's kidding. Some can't be saved. It makes you question humanity. Just know that you set me free. By listening, I love you. Back at ya." So here's another screenshot with Evan Rachel Wood basically telling her, hey, don't read all the crap. It'll just, drive you nuts. That's honestly normal good advice to give a public figure or somebody who's going through something like this. So then it looks like one of the last things she said was, this is Ashley saying, "I don't comment, but look at the hate people have in this public case. I'm out." That's more convincing to me than anything Ashley Smithline said. This other very damning declaration from one of Smithline's friends. Why didn't people talk about this either? I am a friend of Ashley Morgan Smithline and was in frequent communication with her last year in 2020. On June 8, 2022, Ashley left me a voicemail in which she stated, quote, "Don't repeat this to anyone. I swear to God, don't say this to anyone. And I'm not going to say it like over anything but speaking. But I did get a private message on my cellular telephone from Marilyn Manson's lawyer saying, I was wondering if we could just talk. It was about a week ago. I have not called back. Obviously, it's very clear that a lawyer legally shouldn't and can't call me without calling my lawyer directly. He called. I'll play you the message. It says, Howard, It says, "Hi, Ashley, this is Howard King, or Harold King, or whatever his name is. I'd like to speak with you just one-on-one directly. No lawyers or something." He said, just talk like people. And the only reason why he would be calling me at all a week ago and leaving me a message is that he thinks I'm the weak link. And he might want to settle with me to turn on the other girls and say that it was all like a ruse. This is Smithline's friend coming out and saying that Manson's lawyer contacted her off the book. He didn't contact her lawyer to talk about a negotiation. He contacted her directly. And then miraculously, after that, there's an announcement made that her case against Manson has dismissed. Now, she says she didn't take any money from Manson. And she also says in her interviews that she hasn't taken any money to do that. But there are other incentives to change your tune. It's very possible that she was lying to Evan Rachel Wood. It's very possible that she told Evan Rachel Wood, these things happened to me, but when she did that, she was lying and she knew it. And then when it blew up to be bigger than she thought it was going to be, she realized that she was going to potentially be under penalty of perjury by saying the things that she said. So by creating an agreement that they waive any future litigation against her for committing perjury in court, right? The other thing is, it's very careful for her to say, I have not received money from Mr. Warner. There are ways to get around receiving money in a lawsuit, okay? If she were to have received some sort of financial gain, it's unlikely that it would have come directly from Brian Warner. It would have come from some other bank account. So technically, literally, she didn't get that money from Brian Warner. And so she can go on public channels and say that. But as I said, I'm going to put a link in the description below to the interview that she did on another channel. And in my opinion, she does not come across as a credible human being. As I said, there's a hearing on April 11th where the parties will make their arguments and against Manson's lawsuit moving forward. And when that decision's made, I'll give you an update. But until then, I'm left to wonder, why didn't this vital update get as much, if any at all, attention on YouTube as when Smithline first recanted her allegations? Now, listen, I'm as critical of mainstream media as anyone. When we say that mainstream media is overly biased and only stands for one side or the other, that means we know it's wrong to present an overly skewed view in our coverage, right? In this particular case, mainstream media actually covered both sides. They covered the fact that Smithline recanted, and they covered the fact that the judge threw it out. Now, unless I'm missing something, YouTube only covered Smithline's recantation. Now, it's not up to me to say why this is happening, but I can say that behaving in the same manner that we criticize breaks down our credibility. And from a purely ethical perspective, it's really not fair to whichever party is not being given equitable treatment in that coverage. Now, lastly, I'll say this. It's possible that Evan Rachel Wood is lying and that she wasn't abused by Manson. That's not for me to decide. It's also not really for you to decide. It's for the courts to decide. But Evan's accusations represent the accusations of one of many people, including other past girlfriends, groupies, and bandmates and assistants who have made similar accusations. If Evan's accusations are taken off the table, it'll certainly help Manson's public image and profile because she's probably the most high-profile accuser. But it doesn't mean all of those other accusations just poof, spontaneously combust. It's ignorant to pile Manson into a group of wrongfully accused Me Too men and to pile Evan into a pile of shrieking Amber Heards. It's ignorant. You have to look at every case one by one. My advice is to look at each allegation on its merits based on the facts. And before you come to your own conclusions, be sure to look across all media for updates on these dynamic situations because you can't count on getting every side from YouTube or from mainstream media. That's unfortunate, but it's true. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and consider supporting the channel by becoming a member. And peace out.